And welcome back, party people. Thank you for tuning in to Beyond the Profile podcast. I am your host, Sheiny. If this is your first time downloading, subscribing, listening, thank you. If you are returning again, well, thank you too. Why the hell not? Let's just thank everyone while we're at it. My guest today is a friend of mine, Jen Kranjik. She is a health and nutrition expert living in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And we go over a number of things. We go over her time in CrossFit, in weightlifting, what got her started in that space, how she leveraged that exercise and nutritional background at George Washington University and got into what she's doing right now with her new project, Learn to Lift. I want you guys to really key in on the things that she's talking about in terms of how she leveraged her passion and opportunities in that health and nutrition space and how she turned it into a business. I mean, she is someone who is very articulate, someone that I look up to because, I mean, she's my nutrition coach. I mean, she is someone that I have looked to for advice, looked to get more and more information about health and nutrition. And we go into that a little bit more and even hit on some mental health aspects as well. Want you guys to tune in. Let me know what you think. Please leave a comment. I'm excited. Let's get going. Oh, yeah. All right, welcome everyone, and thank you for tuning in. Today, I have a good friend on the show today. She's a health and nutrition coach. She's actually my nutrition coach, an entrepreneur and former CrossFit coach. But what she's really known for is for helping people get beyond the overwhelm of information about what to eat and how to work out so that they can get fit and get on with living a fulfilling life. That good friend of mine is Jen Kranjec. Jen, thanks for joining the show.
Yes, so excited to be here. Thank you for that intro. I feel like you really boiled it down really well.
Yeah, I got it from, I think it was like your blog post back in 2018 of essentially like, hey mom, like this is what I do.
Yes. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Exactly.
It's cool to hear people like reflect back who you are because you're like, oh, like what I'm putting out is actually like well received or like it's, you know, it's being heard. I appreciate that.
Exactly. And you're kind of in this space too. You're in this health and nutrition space where I feel like ultimately it's extremely saturated and there are a lot of different people on different platforms where we are seeing, okay, like how to lose 10 pounds in 2 weeks and stuff of that sort. And I think we'll really get into that a little bit more later on in the interview, but I kind of just want you to give us a little bit background of yourself, where you grew up, family life, everything of that sort.
Cool. Yeah. So I grew up in a suburb of Philadelphia, and I actually currently live in Philly, but between, growing up and now, I've lived in Kansas City. I lived in California for 2 years. I started college out there on the West Coast, and then I transferred to GW, George Washington University in DC, and that's where we met. And then within the last 2 years, I've relocated back to Philly. So I've done a good bit of just exploring and traveling, and in some ways it feels like in that whole process kind of just discovered more of who I was and really just got more clear on just myself in some ways, right? So like it's almost like, do you know the idea or the mythological like framework of like the hero's journey or whatever, where you hero? It's a mythical framework for like a lot of different stories where the hero leaves home to like go on this journey and be transformed, only to return home to realize that, you know, they were whole and they were complete the whole time. But in the journey, there's this like transformation.
Oh, that's so
Anyway, so I feel like that's been my last like decade, and it's a continued process. Yeah, so growing up, I was always into sports. And at a very young age, I specifically was attracted to working out. So I think that like it's interesting because, you know, we think like, oh yeah, like you're really into sports, you're athletic. But I think that there is a specific draw to just like working out that's like separate, right? Because some people like playing sports and they don't like the actual conditioning and all that. But I was like specifically interested in working out. And I actually have like one of my earliest memories is my mom had this set of dumbbells in her, like a little simple set of dumbbells in her closet. And I would sneak into her closet and pull these dumbbells out of when I was alone, and I would play with them. Like, you know, like I would lift, like I would work out, whatever. I have no idea what I was doing, but it was like, I like my like and you know, we'll obviously talk more about like how I got where I am now, but as I look back, that's one of those pivotal memories where I'm like, this whole thing has just been unfolding for as long as I can remember. You know, like I was like, who does that? You know, and when you're going through it at the time, it's like, oh yeah, this is my life, this is normal. But now I'm like, I was like 7 and I was intrigued by this set of dumbbells my mom had, and like, no wonder I'm doing what I'm doing now, you know?
Exactly. You grew up with one or two brothers.
I have 3 older brothers,
3 older. Okay.
and my mom wanted a girl, so it was, you know, all the attempts until I came along, and I ended up being like the sportiest, like tomboy girl ever, you know.
That's amazing.
Our family dynamic was interesting growing up. We all just like my brothers and I, like my parents weren't necessarily super unified, so we grew up in a situation where we all just kind of figured out life on our own and became really independent. And I think that in a lot of ways, I'm really thankful for that. And you know, it's easy to look back on your childhood and maybe like wish things were different or whatever, but I'm really grateful for the like life skills that I kind of gained. And I think that that really ties into who I am and where I am right now. So I guess that's kind of a good, just like summary really is like, or just an overview of this person that I am, right? Like grew up, 3 older brothers, super independent. All of us were kind of like doing our own thing. And I was always into sports. I was like a skater chick. I skated with all the boys in 7th grade. You know, it was just like, and as long as I can remember, really being interested in health and fitness and feeling like that is the direction I wanted to go in.
And it's funny how you mentioned that. I mean, we were just talking about how you came about in your own family of being so independent, and your siblings were so independent as well. And now you've really come full circle, just being back in Philly, starting your own business, and then also on top of that, doing something that you are just so passionate about still. And one of the things that you did, especially when you were at GW, is that you really knew what you wanted to do. You dove in to study exercise and nutritional sciences. What did you know before then that is exactly what you wanted to study? Or is that something that you kind of just had to come back to and realize again, shoot, I really love this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So initially I thought I wanted to actually go to med school. So like one of my earlier memories too, kind of relating to career vocation, is just it's kind of like, you know, the way I think about it is that, and I can only speak from my own experience, so I've always kind of just had this kind of deeper intuitive guidance as far as like where like the work that I wanted to do, and wasn't necessarily sure exactly what it would look like. So like, for example, I've always been interested and drawn to, like I was saying, like drawn to working out. And then in high school, I started to get more into nutrition, and a lot of that was just me struggling with my own like disordered eating and just really trying to understand like what is the right nutrition approach. And so I was always really intrigued and interested in fitness. And for a while, though, I did want to go to med school. So I was initially, when I was applying for school, I was thinking I would get, I would do like a pre-med track and then apply to med school. And then I started to kind of rethink that and realized that it just didn't feel right for me. Like part of it was just like, oh, it feels like that's just a good profession to go into, to be a doctor and make a lot of money and whatever. But I just felt like with more of the health and fitness approach, I can be more like hands-on with people and really, helping more the preventative aspect too of health and fitness, where it's like, med school, you're studying medicine. And while I think that our modern medicine and just medical community is great, there's a lot of really awesome things going on there. I personally was just drawn more towards the fitness side. But it did take me a little bit of time to kind of figure that out and, sort through. I think that's one aspect of it too, is really sorting through just kind of the desires of your ego, maybe to just like have this great title and make a lot of money versus like, well, what really feels true for me, and like bringing it back to kind of that more mysterious guidance that I am speaking of, because it's not like, I don't think we get to a point where it's like we just all of a sudden know what job title we want. It's more of, you brought up the word passions, and it's more of these passions that really drive us. And if we follow them, then the like labels and the actual titles and the roles, I guess I should say, like they start to become clear as you go. So once I decided, okay, I've always been into fitness and health, and I'm more into, I think when I started college, I was studying kinesiology at a small school in Southern California, and I was thinking pre-med at the time. And then at one point, when I transferred to GW, I shifted to wanting to go into public health. So I kept trying to like, it's funny because as I look back, it's like I kept trying to find other ways to do what I eventually ended up doing, which was starting my own thing.
Exactly.
Because I was like, okay, maybe I'll, first it's like, okay, I'll go to med school. And then it's like, no, I'll like get a PhD in public health or something. And it's like, and then I realized it's like, why? I'm just trying to pursue a degree, or like, I'm just trying to pursue a title. And then eventually, I was just kind of like settled on what was actually happening, which was I was studying exercise science, and I was just going to take it one step at a time.
Exactly. And, you talked about that process of, initially you wanted to do med school, pre-med,
Mm-hmm.
and then you led into exercise and nutritional sciences. I mean, at the end of the day, what you wanted to do was help people.
Right.
And that you were just such a people person that just, diving into your own venture and helping people, learn about nutrition and health and the real and simple ways of lifting and understanding your body. I mean, that's just something that, yeah, you could have gone to med school at the end of the day, but like you finding that passion, it's incredible. It's remarkable that you, right after school, was it what, like a couple years that you kind of just dove in to
Mm-hmm.
this venture?
Yeah. So I guess, so let's fast forward to GW. So I transferred to GW, and then while I was a junior senior, I was coaching at Praxis. So that's where we met. So I was coaching CrossFit. I was also working in the restaurant industry as a server to, help make ends meet as well. And then eventually I was like, okay, cool. Like, I'm going to graduate soon. and it's funny because as I think about it, I was never like, okay, let me find a job. Like, I, in some ways, I'm like way too go with the flow. And we can talk about the ways that that's a negative thing. But um, I, I was content with what I was doing and knew that I don't know, there was just a trust that things were going to unfold as they would. And I would be okay, So I had the praxis job, and then they offered me to be the assistant general manager as I graduated. So that kind of just unfolded perfectly. So now I'm like managing this CrossFit gym. Meanwhile, I was able to start up within the gym, started a like small kind of nutrition coaching program. And as I look back on that, it was just like I'm so grateful for one, the praxis team of guys who were just trusting me to just do this thing. I didn't know what I was doing really. I mean, I'd had some experience from school. I also had an internship that really prepared me well. I had my own personal kind of fat loss transformation. But then just being given the opportunity to just start this program within the gym was awesome. And that gave me then the tools to then start working at Composition ID and doing some nutrition coaching there, which was a small business in DC that does DEXA scans, body composition analysis, and they offer nutrition coaching to kind of pair with that to help improve your body composition, fat loss, gaining muscle. So that's kind of where I was, feeling like, okay, I'm managing this gym. I am doing some nutrition coaching. I guess there was kind of still an unknown of like, well, where am I really headed? What am I really doing? And I do remember at one point, there's this like, again, a memory that kind of just sticks out to me where I had this moment of realizing I can just start my own business, just like, it just hit me like that. And cause like, you don't just grow. And I didn't have any like entrepreneurial parents really. It wasn't like in the family. I didn't really know a lot of people that started businesses. So for me, it was this moment of realizing, well, I could do that, because I think a lot of people, we look for a job, we look to work for someone else, and that's totally fine. But to get to that point where you're like, oh, I could just start my own thing. And that idea crossed my mind, and I really kind of sat with it and felt like, yeah, that feels like the thing,
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Yeah, no, it's funny when you look back a little bit too. I remember when I was coaching at Praxis with you, I think I mentioned something about macros, and I was like, "Oh yeah, like this is what I do. This is what I do." And then you kind of came with like a different angle at it, and you were like, "Well, have you like thought of it this way, and then how it affects your body this way?" And I was like, I was just so wide eyed, and I was like, "Oh my god."
mm,
No, I just know how to calculate it.
mhm,
Like that's
mhm,
it. And
mhm,
then just taking a step forward from that, when you started at Composition ID, I went to go get a DEXA scan at your shop, and I was even more blown away because there was just so much data collected and out in front of you, and you just read through all of it and were breaking it down to a T that you just knew that you were going to do something in this space,
mhm, mhm,
and you were just going to take it by storm, essentially.
mhm, mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And so that's a good point. And it brings me to like, for me, I got really in the weeds with, like I mentioned earlier, that when I was kind of in high school and early in college, I started to become really almost like obsessed with figuring out like, how should I eat? And, some of it was driven by my own desire to be skinnier or whatever, just wanting to look a certain way. But also really noticing how there's so much conflicting information about what to eat, why, how, like carbs are good, fat is good, carbs are bad, fat is bad, like, you know, meat is bad, like all this stuff, right? And I was just like, okay, well, I'm going to find the answer. And I struggled with my own relationship with food, with bad information, you know, just my own process through all of that, but then started to come across more of the scientific approach to nutrition and really started to feel like, oh, this is really starting to make sense now. And with this like more fundamental understanding of nutrition and how it just works more just kind of objectively, you know, without all the like good versus bad. I got really into, like, you brought up all the information and kind of the data. I got really into the data, like really breaking everything down to numbers. And I see that a lot in the fitness industry now, where people are really honing in on every little detail. And I think that that can be really helpful. And I started to notice in myself, like, yeah, I'm getting answers, I'm getting results, I'm getting some clarity. But then I started to realize this is one, not going to be approachable for most people because I'm obsessed with it and I can't expect the general population to become obsessed with nutrition or become obsessed with fitness, and they don't need to. Like, it's just us weirdos who work in the fitness industry that are like obsessed with it, you know? And it's not healthy. Like I've gone through phases of really pulling away and just like letting loose and not caring so much about all of the details, because ultimately, like you said in the intro, like my goal for myself and with others that I work with is to help them get fit and then get on with life. You know, not make fitness their life, but really to use it as this thing that we can kind of automate and like kind of get over and just have it be, yeah, we're just naturally now moving and eating well, and it's not overthought anymore. So that brings me to kind of where I started to see opportunity, right? Because you're right that the fitness industry is very saturated, as most industries are, and it's really trying to like hone in on what is your unique voice or mission or purpose. And for me, it became simplifying things and really bringing it down to the most practical level. Because I've been through a lot of different phases with fitness and nutrition, and I don't expect everyone to go through that. So it's kind of like, how can I use my knowledge and my experience to now create something new, create a new path so that we can really bring this information to the general population. And that's my target audience, is because, you know, if we go back to what I was saying about wanting to be a doctor, I wanted to be a general practitioner. I wanted to help people in their everyday lives. And I think in the fitness industry, it can be really easy to get super niched into like helping athletes or helping people who want to get to like 10% body fat. And, you know, it's cool. But now we're just doing this for like, it's leisure, it's just for fun, it's privilege to be able to, you know, get your body fat super low and work out at the gym and get really jacked. Like, that is completely voluntary. Great. Do that. I love it. You know, I've done it myself. But at the end of the day, I want to help people who, like, they're, you know, maybe they could live 10 years longer if we fix their, you know, get their nutrition and fitness in line, or their quality of life improves exponentially. That's where I'm really interested. So then I started to realize that, okay, if these are the people I want to help, they're not going to be obsessed with fitness, and I don't want them to have to be. So how can I just deliver things in a simple, approachable way? And that is what really became my vision for my own work in the fitness industry.
Yeah, no, and you're really hitting on essentially like the niche that you're finding in this fitness industry, and I think a lot of us are in this kind kind of like a comparison complex where we are all on our phones, we're all on the internet, comparing ourselves to other people. And what we tend to do is, I know for me personally, I compare myself to other fitness gurus and athletes, and it's like, wait a sec. I am not a fitness guru athlete who is working out 3 to 4 hours a day, 7 days a week, having like a nutrition coach, cook, things like that,
Mhm,
where
mhm.
we just get lost in the weeds of understanding our true reality. And I think that's something that gets lost in something that for you to provide that service to other people and essentially, like you said, automate that nutrition and that health and getting them to a point where they're understanding how to work out easier, work out more simply. Even the new venture that we were talking about before the show about learn to lift. It's it's incredible. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, actually, so learntolift.com is what feels like to me the main endeavor in my career that to this point I've actually been working to. Um, Meaning everything I've done so far has feels like it's kind of been a stepping stone. And I imagine that Learn to Lift will be a stepping stone to the next thing, which will be the next thing. Like I definitely look to the future as this like evolving, continually building thing. But when I first launched, so jenkranjec.com is kind of my main site right now. And when I launched that to me felt like it was a placeholder in some ways because I never really wanted to be create like build my own nutrition coaching or a personal coaching brand. And there's a lot of people out there in the industry that do that, and it didn't feel right from like I didn't want to make something that was about me as much as I wanted to create a product or a brand that has a life of its own and could actually exist without me potentially, but that it's just this other piece of value that is not just me as the brand. And when I was like coming up with jenkranjec.com for a while, I was trying to think of like, what's the brand name going to be? What's this company going to be? I was trying to create this thing, and nothing landed with me, and I think that's a kind of an important part of the process or that was an important part of the process for me was realizing like, okay, it's not the time yet for whatever. And then eventually Learn to Lift came about, right? So it's like, I didn't force whatever at the time. And it's easy to just use yourself as your placeholder brand, jenkranjec.com. And then I started to realize, again, it's almost like for me, it feels like it's like deciding or figuring out what my niche is, what my calling is, has been almost like just detective work in my own life, right? Because I find that like life is kind of just unfolding with it. Like all of the people you meet, the places you go, the things you're interested in, you don't necessarily like sit down and create those things or decide like this is what my life is going to be, right? Like it's happening, and it's this beautiful thing where there you meet connections, you learn different things that you retain and you become passionate about or whatever. So for me, I started to realize as I looked back on my life so far and the things I was interested in, it was like, I'm really interested in lifting. And the other theme, like if you go to jenkranjec.com, my tagline is getting fit and healthy should be simple. And that is true and true. That is like my mission statement. Getting fit and healthy should be simple. Not easy, but simple. There's enough information out there that we know how to do it, and we just need to make it less complicated. But so as I looked back on my life, I told you about the dumbbell story when I was like 7. I remember like my mom got me a gym membership as a birthday present or something. It's like, who is this chick
That's
that is
incredible.
like stoked to go to the gym? I used to sneak in the gym with my mom when I was like 12, right? It's like all these things. And then when I was a senior in college, we got the opportunity to do a project with like really as much creative freedom as we wanted. Like it could be anything. And I decided to initially I was going to do like a meta-analysis and do like super sciencey whatever. And then I was like, why am I making this harder on myself than it needs to be? So I decided I created an ad campaign for muscle. And it stemmed from some of this research that I was finding that really pointed out a lot of the benefits of muscle for health reasons, right? So our culture is so obsessed with muscle for the aesthetic value and performance. Like athletes are, obviously into building muscle, and then people who want to look a certain way. But I started to notice in the research how much muscle it's metabolically active tissue. If we're trying to fight chronic disease and diabetes specifically, your muscles metabolize carbohydrates. So the more that you use the muscle, the more muscle you build, the more easily your body can metabolize carbohydrates, and prevent some of the metabolic issues that come with aging, obesity, all of these things. And then obviously, the more muscle you have, the more strength you have, the more mobile you are into your later years of life. A lot of people, life really starts to decline when you're immobile, when other people have to take care of you. It's just you lose a central part of your freedom when you can't move your body anymore, And I just became really captivated by those points. So then, I realized I was like, okay, clearly this is a common theme that Jen is doing. So learn to lift is the thing. And I just remember I had a moment again. There's always like little pivotal moments that I remember. I don't even remember where it came from, but just the idea for the domain came up, learn to lift. And I remember I looked it up, I was like, is this taken? And learntolift.com was available. And it was not crazy expensive. It was like $300 or something. And I was like, I'm going to do it. I bought it like 2 years ago at this point.
Oh, wow.
And then like I could not have created any of this. Like, this is why I'm saying like, it's just what's happening. Because then I moved to Philly, and Renaissance periodization, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's this, pretty big fitness company. They're pretty popular in the CrossFit community, but also growing outside of that. They recently created this automated diet app, which is super cool. It tailors a diet to you and then just kind of updates it each week based on your progress. But one of the co-founders and head chief sports scientists, Mike Israetel, I followed him on Instagram before I even moved to Philly. Turns out he lives in Philly. Turns out he works out at the same gym that I am now working out at. And then we start talking, and then sooner than later, I am just, I'm working for RP in customer service and then doing some nutrition coaching. And then I talked to him about Learn to Lift, which I familiarly call LTL.
Nice.
LTL. And, I consulted with him on the whole idea on the project. He was like, yeah, this is awesome. Life just handed me this awesome mentor and friend and guide. And so now it just feels like I have all the tools, I have all the people, all the connections, the domain, like everything was just kind of, it feels like it's been put in my lap in some ways. And it's like, do this thing, Jen. Okay, cool. I'll do LTL. I have no choice at this point.
Exactly. I mean, you just got to jump in, but I mean, it sounds like you are. One of the things that I was going to bring up too is, usually when you start a venture like this, you have guidance, you have consulting, or a mentor to kind of lean in on and really just kind of give you a little nudge, give you a little shove towards it. For you, it sounds like Mike, it didn't really happen until you got to Philly, but before that, you launched your own website. So Was there someone else that kind of pushed you a little bit more into this? Was this just really like super gen motivation? Like
Mhm.
what was it?
Mhm. So when I launched Kranjec.com, I mean, I didn't really have any mentors at that time that were guiding me in terms of like business. And to be honest, like it probably would have been helpful if I did. I don't, and still to this day, the business side of things, I know that that's an area where I need to spend more time learning because, some people start a business because they're interested in business, and some people start a business because they have this passion and it needs to manifest in the world as a business. And I would say that I'm the second, where it's like there's this thing that I see that I want to do and it doesn't already exist, and that's why I'm starting something. So definitely, I would recommend finding a mentor for anyone or just asking people about business. And, I think it's helpful to find a real human that you trust because there's so many like coaches, business coaches out there on social media trying to sell you their 10 steps to 10K in 10 days, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that can often just cause like overwhelm and feel like, oh my God, I'm not like starting a business as soon as all these other people and I'm not making enough money. And, I think it's important to like stay really connected to the mission. At least for me, it has been. So I've always tried to like bring it back to, okay, but there's this like really important thing at the root of this, and I want to stay connected to that. And obviously balance that with being good at running a business and being productive, but not losing sight of the whole intention. But anyway, I was thankful to, and in DC, again, this is another thing that just unfolded perfectly, where at the time when I was working on Kranjec.com, I met a new friend she was a barista at La Colombe, and she's a really good friend. Jillian is like my BFF now. And she's my barista,
Shout out to
and
Jillian.
one day she was like, yo, we should be friends. So we started hanging out, and one of like our second time hanging out, I told her about Kranjec.com, and she's a super creative person, and she was like, yo, I'll help you with it. So she helped me with the website, and that was super helpful, to have someone to hold me accountable. We set a timeline. We had this like launch date. We met regularly to work on the project. So I think that's a super important thing for anyone, when you're trying to get something done, is to have someone to hold you accountable to it. Which it's funny because this time around with launching LTL, that hasn't really been the case, where I've really been doing it more so on my own. And that's part of the reason it's just been delayed, because I'm not being held accountable to someone else. And, that's part of my own process of growing and really stepping into this new role. But I was thankful to have another human to work on it with. And then now, like I said, Mike has been a super helpful guide as well, in terms of business, and then also the more technical side of the science and the workouts and stuff itself. But I will be honest and say that I have, some business growth ahead for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, we all need like push and motivation just to like
Mhm,
get to where we are. I mean,
mhm,
like, I work in finance. I have no creative background whatsoever. And in launching this podcast, it's been extremely hard to like motivate yourself because I'm the only one
mhm.
doing this.
Right.
But but I also have no creative background. So what
Hey,
do you
you're
do?
a human, and humans are just
There
creative.
you go. There you go. We're all just fucking humans.
Yeah.
Um, but at, at this point too, while you're going through these trials and tribulations,
Mhm.
life has to get in the way at some point. Were there any sort of fears, or were you scared about anything? Were there any hills that you really had to climb over to get to this point to where you are right now?
Yes. I love that question because I think it's the absolute most important aspect of the journey is all of the trials, all of the challenges. They're just as much part of it as any moment of success. And in fact, like you take away the challenges and that moment of success doesn't exist. And actually, for me, part of the delay in launching like part 2 of my brand with LTL is when I launched Kranjec.com, so the idea is real, simple fitness, right? So it's the first part of it is real. And that is really alluding to this idea of authenticity, really being, this isn't about putting out any type of image other than just the real human experience, because that is what people relate to. That is what will help people grow and really find peace in their own lives when it's real, when it's relatable, when it's human and not showy. So, I put that out there that for me, I wanted to create a brand that was really authentic. So then that led me to the question of like, who am I? Like, what am I even doing? How do I be authentic? Right. And it's a silly thing because it's like, how do I be authentic? You don't try, you just be. But sometimes we have stuff that's kind of getting in the way of us really just being our most authentic, alive self.
True.
And so the last 2 years have really been, so like Kranjec.com propelled me into this journey of even deeper self-discovery. And my business is just an extension of me in some ways. So the more that I grow, the more that I become just like the true version of myself, the more authentic the brand is without even trying. Right. So it's like, I guess like my biggest thing has really been like putting things off. Like, oh, I'll do it later. I'll do it next month. Do it next month. And so eventually I started to really look at that. Like, well, what am I doing? Why am I doing that? Right? Like, what's the underlying motivation here? And usually it's fear. So what am I afraid of? And it's really something that it's moving from the idea of this whole thing. Like I can sit here all day and talk about how great my idea is and just conceptualize how much the world needs it and all this stuff. But if I don't turn it into action, it's nothing. It's not even, the idea doesn't do anything, right? So I started to see that more and more and honestly just kind of like get frustrated with myself. And sometimes that's just what needs to happen. We need to just get tired of ourselves to realize like, okay, I'm ready to change, So for me, one of the biggest hurdles has been balancing everything else that I'm doing. So I'd say I have like a bunch of different side gigs. I do some personal training. I have my nutrition coaching and workout programming with my own clients. And then I work for RP in a few different ways. So it's really just like stepping up and saying, okay, this is what I need to do. I want to get LTL launched into the world. I need to organize my time. I need to start to view myself as this person who is productive, who owns a business, who is doing all of this in the world and moving, kind of like letting my old self-image fall away in some ways too, and really letting myself kind of be transformed and step into this new phase. So it's been a lot of transformation and different challenges that come up that really kind of help propel that transformation along the way.
Exactly. And I mean, it sounds like too, with what you're doing right now with LTL and the work that you're doing, personal training and with RP, I mean, you're still learning from other people. Mm-hmm. So even though you're doing something else and you have those side hustles and those side gigs, you're still learning at the same time to help LTL and your personal brand. So mm-hmm. It's something that I don't think that we think about too much. But I don't know. It's something that can definitely pay dividends.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. And you were kind of talking about, it's real simple fitness. That is your mission.
Mm-hmm.
I know when I've worked with you, that's what you really try to dig in with your clientele.
So as a coach, I don't want to tell someone what they need to do. I'm always trying to, I'll suggest things. If we come up with something, I will provide the more technical side of things, but I want to help them to find within their own experience what they really need at this time. Meaning, like, some people, they need to track macros. Like, that's going to be the thing that really helps them. Other people, maybe they just need to work on eating slower or not tracking. Like, some people, you're too obsessed with tracking. Now you need to just say F it to the tracking and stop doing that, right? So it's like, there's no right or wrong way to be. There's no right or wrong habit. Everything is very contextual. And especially when we're talking about like the coaching aspect of things, it's just very individual. It's very different. And it's just this journey that I get to kind of go on with different people. So I guess to sum that up, like the takeaway is, yes, it's simple, but it's also changing, and we have to have grace for ourselves when all of a sudden what got us from A to B no longer gets us from B to C, right? We need to be able to pivot and change and just continue to be really honest and present with what's true, what's really happening in our lives. Maybe you were an athlete in college. I work with people all the time where when I first start to get to know them, they're like, I was an athlete in college and now this is what's going on in my life. And, it's part of it is like you're holding on to your identity as an athlete and now you're a mother of 3.
Yeah, totally.
Don't try to be that athlete. Be the mother of 3, and really be where you are.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, we love to hold on to titles, and we love putting those titles upon ourselves and say like, yeah, I was a college athlete. It was great. Right. No, that was like 10 years ago. We've all evolved. We've all changed. You are something else now. Yeah, that was an amazing thing of what you did in the past.
Mm-hmm.
But come on, man, let's fucking move on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's definitely something that, when you work with a personal trainer and a coach, you find that by talking to them and you really become a people person. And that's something that I think is extremely valuable. What you're doing with LTL, with Kranjec.com, I mean, it's great. It really is. And I've seen results personally. So anyone out there, if you don't believe it, trust me. Okay. I really want to thank you for taking the time. This was wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I look forward to more conversations with you. And I think that you're following your passion and I'm excited for you. It's cool. It's like this like symbiotic relationship going on here. We're just doing the creative thing. You're a creative person.
Yeah, thanks. And before we sign off, I have just a couple last questions that I wanted to ask you. All right. So these are questions that I like to ask everyone after the episode, towards the end. First question is, kind of looking back on your freshman year of college self, when you were in a small school in Southern California, what piece of advice would you give to yourself right now?
The advice that I would give this person is honestly just have more fun.
Yeah.
And maybe not every college freshman needs to hear that, but my college freshman self did, because I think that I was taking myself too seriously. So that would be my advice, is to just not take everything so seriously.
That's awesome. Next question. We're going through this interview right now during these crazy tough times, with COVID and everything. And who knows when we'll see full normalcy again. But
Mhm.
from your health and nutritional perspective, what sort of things are you recommending to your clients right now to go out and do to, stay on top of their nutrition? Is there any sort of constant message that you are telling your clients right now as all of us are going through this shitty time?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, well, one thing is that everyone's experience is different right now. So, and that's kind of the crazy thing, right? It's like we're all kind of going through this collective thing together, but having such drastically different experiences. I have one client who working out is just not on the table, and my advice was, okay, don't work out. That's
Yeah,
fine. You
that's
know,
perfect.
right? It's like if you're mad stressed and there's all this stuff going on, like, okay, that's fine. Um, and whereas other people, it's you have more time on your hands, so you can work out and get in better shape. I think as a whole, the general advice, I do think that movement is just an essential part of the human, like just being a human, having a body, is that we need to move. So finding those little movement breaks in the day where you get up and just move, dance, do some push-ups, whatever. It doesn't have to be, working out. I think if this time has taught me anything or really solidified something that I was kind of already on to, is that working out doesn't have to be so structured. And of course, it can and should be if you have a very specific goal. But, if you want to just do like a 10-minute workout or go, for a quick walk, whatever, those are the things that if you get that in place as a habit where you move for 15 minutes a day or whatever, based on where you're at, just some type of movement is really good, and really using this time to just connect to your body in a different way, maybe some more body weight stuff, yoga, whatever it is. The other thing too is that it's so much easier to maintain your muscle mass if you're afraid of losing all your muscle. Um, it's it's easier to maintain it than you might think. So do your push pull squat hinge, few sets of each per week, and you'll maintain your muscle.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
No, that's great advice too. I mean, the workouts that I used to do were extremely structured, and I love that. But now, like, I can't go into a gym,
Mhm.
so I've been forced to create my own workouts or to go on more walks, do yoga, like
Mhm.
stretch, just little things like that that I never thought I would be doing for this extended period of time.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, the other thing too that I would say is, okay, so you do lose a little bit of muscle or a little bit of strength over this period. We can get back to the gym and experience those newbie gains all over again.
Perfect.
So that's something to look forward to, to start to see your numbers just like go up. Like you don't see that very often if you're more of an advanced trainee. So that's something to look forward to.
Exactly. That's amazing. Well said. And then the last question I have for you, do you feel like you've found your passion in the work that you're doing right now, or are you still looking for it?
Yes, I think I have. And, I would say that I feel like it's almost like your passion finds you.
No, that's a good way of putting it.
um, or at least that's how it's felt in my experience. Because it's there the whole time, or at least for me, as I look back again on like my interests and the things that have been kind of driving me forward. So I am very grateful. I don't take that for granted because I know that some people really struggle more with that. And maybe you don't have relationships that support you in pursuing your passions. I think that's a lot of it is really just having the mindset that even allows for exploring these things that are maybe outside the box. If your parents just expect you to be this, or society is telling you to do this, and you're not opening your mind or exploring your passions or your interests, I think a lot of people, more often than not, if you ask them, like, if you could start over, what would you do? What are you passionate about? What are you interested in? Most people have something they know, like, there's something in there, and maybe it's not very concrete. Like I said, it was more of an abstract thing, and it took me a while to get to this point where I'm like, oh, I'm going to create this Learn to Lift program. It's not like when I was 15, I was like, I'm going to create a beginner lifting program. It
Yeah,
evolves, but it was really leaning in and trusting that passion that was always there. So
that's huge. Yeah, no, that's super well said, Jen. Yeah, no, thank you so much. This was an incredible interview, ton of insight. I mean, I know I'm going to get off and I'm going to be like, oh my God, just thinking about the things that were said. Like, I feel like I really need to digest this for, for a few more hours. Where can people find you, Jen? On social media, your website?
yeah, so jenkranjec.com is my main site right now. Learntolift.com will be live very soon. So by the time this is being listened to, hopefully that'll be live. Instagram is my main social media platform. Kranjec Fitness is my personal kind of fitness account. And then underscore Learn to Lift is going to be the Instagram for Learn to Lift. So a bunch of content is going to be going up through LTL. That's kind of my main baby, my endeavor at this point. So that'll be the place to connect.
Awesome. Everyone check it out. It'll be amazing. I know it will once LTL launches.
Yes.
Jen, thank you again. This was wonderful.
Thank you, Mike. This has been really good.
All right. Again, thank you to Jen. Thank you all for tuning in and listening, subscribing, commenting, whatever that may be. Thank you. I hope you guys took something out of this in terms of health and nutrition, how she really dove in and found her passion right out of school. It's definitely a story that I think I'll be thinking about for a while. It's very motivating. Please find us at Beyond the Profile on all of our social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, whatever that may be. And looking forward to the next show. Thanks again, everyone.